So today's topic is the Bhagavad Gita in daily life. Most of you must have read this text at least once. Right now, it is one of the most popular spiritual classics in the world. The text itself is very short, just about 700 verses, taken from a much larger work, that is Mahabharata. Mahabharata is supposed to be the largest, the biggest literary and classical text in the world. It has got 3 different versions. In its shortest version, it contains just about maybe little more than 100,000 verses. In its largest version, it contains 145,000 verses. So its shortest version itself is almost 7 times the size of Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, and Virgil's Aeneid put together. The 2 oldest Greek classics and the oldest classic in Latin. So that's the size of the book. It deals with thousands of characters, hundreds of dynasties, and it contains scores of spiritual dialogues, like the Bhagavad Gita itself. In fact, Bhagavad Gita became so important and so universal just by an historical accident. Gita means a song, and Bhagavad Gita means a song sung by the Lord. The divine music, the divine song, or a hymn or a song which deals with spiritual ideas, in short. Altogether, there are 18 Gitas, spiritual ideas put together in verses. In the popular Vedantic literature, in Bhagavata, Purana, it's another devotion classic, and Mahabharata, which I mentioned. Together, there are 18 Gitas, 18 divine songs, hymns. Bhagavad Gita became so popular as just because of an accident. Shankaracharya happened to write a commentary on this text. That is one reason. There are innumerable Gitas. Some of them are much more sublime from a literary point of view. And some of them are even much more profound in a literary sense. See Vyadha Gita, for example. It's much more profound. But Bhagavad Gita got a unique place in the history of spiritual literature and also in the hearts and minds of millions of people for the last several thousands of years. Because Shankaracharya wrote a commentary. And when he wrote the commentary, the whole text took a new shape. So he built a highly intricate, compact, philosophical edifice on this text. And at the same time, he interpreted the whole text in such a way that it has got a great spiritual message in our everyday life. So it is not just a metaphysical work. It is, of course, a great metaphysical work. But if you look at the whole setting of Gita, there is no metaphysics involved. From an earthly point of view, the listener is a very, very ordinary man, Arjuna. The Arjuna whom you find at the beginning of Gita the student who puts questions to Krishna, in response to which Sri Krishna interprets Gita, is a very ordinary man, this Arjuna. He was a soldier. You have to remember, when we call him a soldier, we have to remember, by profession he happened to be a soldier whose duty was to protect the weak, the women folk, and the good people from evildoers. That was his profession. Just like policeman's duty is to save the common people from thieves and murderers and criminals. Like that, Arjuna's profession happened to be so. So when you read the Gita, if you come across verses which literally mean that, well, you must fight and do your duty without attachment, don't mistake that Gita is a book about war. If Arjuna were a farmer, Sri Krishna would have asked him to cultivate the field properly. If the farmer says, well, or the whole farming community sometimes boycotts their duty and responsibility of producing food grains, what will happen? The whole country will suffer. There will be famine. So maybe the government may perhaps persuade them to farm the lands so that people will have enough food to eat. So Arjuna's profession happened to be that. So Sri Krishna asked him to do his duty. So in that sense, Arjuna is a very common man. And this problem was an everyday problem. Problem of conflicts, anxieties, and self-doubts that all of us face. In fact, there may not be a single individual anywhere in the world, in any culture, who has not at least once asked this question. I mean, where are we going? What is the meaning of life? What do we do with life? What's the meaning of life and death? How should I interact with people around me? Sometimes we love, we serve, we do everything possible. We go out of our way to help others. We make tremendous sacrifices. And then sometimes, unfortunately, we find the result will be not only lack of gratitude, the result will be hostility. It happens. That's what creates problems. See, life has got one special characteristic. Life doesn't go like mathematics or science. Science and mathematics you have to put aside. See, mathematics, 2 plus 2 is always 4. It cannot be anything else. So also in science, in the laboratory, if you take different chemicals, if you conduct experiments in laboratories under identical conditions, the result will be identical. In fact, that's one of the important criterion for scientific truth. Any experiment, whether you conduct it here in San Francisco, maybe somewhere in the sub-Saharan desert, whatever may be, climates, weather conditions, even the intelligence of the scientist may not affect if the experiment is conducted under identical circumstances. The result should be identical. 2 plus 2 is 4 in mathematics. Scientific experiments will have identical results. But that is not true in human life. In fact, that's why people ask these questions. If human life, like mathematics or computer, will be free from all problems, we can live like a machine. We may either become demons or we may become robots. We can never really predict what we are going to do tomorrow, maybe next moment. We can never be really sure as to what is going to happen this evening. Because predetermination is a psychological impossibility in human life. So as I said earlier, we do go out of our way to do good things, but the result will be the opposite of what we normally expect. 2 plus 2 is always 4. It cannot be otherwise. But in life, you go on doing good things, the result may not be good or pleasant. It may be unpleasant. It may be even tragic. And that's what really creates conflicts in life. Otherwise, there will be no conflict. And mind you, if there is no conflict, there can be no civilization. There cannot be evolution. Without conflict, human civilization can never move forward. Without some obstacles, there will be no progress. Because it's the obstacles in daily life that make us think as to what we are, where we are going, what's the meaning of, or the mystery of life, and how to go beyond the present, the mundane, the empirical world of realities. That was Arjuna's problem. I shall come to the setting, Gita. See, as I said earlier, Gita is a very small portion of the larger work. 700 verses in Gita, more than 100,000 verses in the shortest version of Mahabharata, of which Gita is a part. Gita is in the form of a dialogue between a very ordinary man and a great philosopher, a divine prophet, Krishna. So, I shall just pass through the earlier the background of Gita, because that's not very important for us. At the beginning, you find two armies have assembled. They are about to start a war. And mind you, many great interpreters of Gita, modern interpreters like Gandhi, Aravindo, Tilak, Dr. Radhakrishnan, and also some of the great classical interpreters have interpreted Gita as a conflict that goes on in our mind. So, the battlefield is our own mind. And it is the sign of every civilized human being to face conflicts. See, if you have no conflict, either you should be a great saint like Buddha or Jesus, or you may be somebody like a Hitler. No conflict. The worst demons, scourges, villains of human history never had any conflict. And also, the great saints and sages had no conflict. So, it is the nature of every civilized, cultured, refined, evolving human being to have conflicts. And then as we try to resolve this conflict, we spiritually grow and evolve. The spiritual growth is nothing but a process of journey backward, journey towards our own spiritual home. When we try to solve the problems, we grow, we evolve, we become spiritual, we become cultured human beings. Just before going to the background, another question that may arise. Does Gita solve our problems? Gita doesn't solve our problems, because if Gita could solve our problems, Gita would not be a great teacher. A great teacher doesn't attend examination and answer on behalf of the student. A great teacher teaches the students so that the students study and evolve and become capable of answering the questions in the examination. See, if a physical trainer says, well, I shall run on behalf of you, you stay here, the runner will never become a proficient athlete. So Gita really doesn't solve our problems, but Gita enables us. Gita gives us the capability to look at our problems in everyday life from a different angle so that problems cease to be problems. When we become mentally, psychologically strong, when we evolve, we learn to look at problems from a very positive angle so that problems will not be problems. That's the uniqueness of Gita. So, coming down to our everyday life experiences, Gita gives us a philosophy of life. Gita teaches us to look upon our own life and its dilemmas and problems from a creative angle so that we are able to solve the problems for ourselves. That is the uniqueness of Gita. Now, as I said, the background, Arjuna, the student, the listener in the Gita, suddenly faces a big crisis, internal crisis. Arjuna had a great reputation as a man of wisdom, as a man of noble character, who never did anything wrong, who always helped the poor and the weak, who tried to help the poor and the weak and the unprotected. But then, on one occasion, when he was faced with the problem of confronting among the enemies some of his own kinsmen, relatives and cousins, he was faced with a great dilemma. Is it proper for me to do my duty as a soldier? He knew very well that his enemies were evildoers. So even Gandhi, the prophet of ahimsa, non-violence, he has written a very, very touching commentary on the Gita, not as a philosopher, because Gandhi himself was not a great scholar in Sanskrit or in philosophy, as he himself admits. That is one of the important points that Gandhi makes in his own introduction, his own write-up on the Gita. But his uniqueness was, he looked upon Gita as a book that guided his everyday life. So he used to say that he used to turn to the pages of the Gita as a child turns to the mother for guidance and protection. And Gita gave him consolation and guidance. So, when Arjuna was faced with this problem, he said, well, I shall not do my duty. So Gandhi himself said that the theme or the topic of Gita has nothing to do with war or battle. The central theme is our spiritual life, how we confront the problems in everyday life. And this is one of the greatest dilemmas. See, you are able to do something. You know it is your duty to do. And if you know very well that if you do not do that duty, people will call you names, you will lose your reputation, you will get ignominy, and you will lose whatever good name you have acquired in your life. You know all this. You know it is your duty. Not to do that duty is the greatest sin that you could commit. That also you know. You are not able to do it. This is, the flesh is willing, the spirit is weak, the other way, mind you. The mind suddenly withdraws, but the man wants to do it. So what do we do? That's a big crisis. So at the beginning of the text, to the end of the first chapter, Gita has got 18 chapters. At the end of the first chapter, that first chapter ends with this. Yadimam apradigaram ashastram shastrapaneha dhatrashtarane hanyustanme kshemadaram bhavet. Evam muktvarjuna sankhe rudophustu upavishad visrja sasharam chapam shoka samvigda manasaha. These are two verses which come at the end of the first chapter, which portray Arjuna's miserable condition. Arjuna said, I want to do my duty. but I'm becoming physically and psychologically weak. My weapons are dropping from my arms. I won't do my duty. I shall simply sit quiet here. Now, this is the end of the first chapter. At the end of the whole text, at the end of 18th chapter, the same Arjuna concludes his dialogue with Krishna. He says, Nashto moha smidurlabdha tut prasadat maya achyuda siddhosmi gada sandeha karishe vachanantava. Arjuna says, now my doubts have gone. Now my mind is peaceful. I have no more conflicts, no more doubts. I shall do as you instructed me. Arjuna, and then Arjuna went to battle. So, what did Krishna do with Arjuna's mind? Now, we have to remember, Karma Yoga is an important theme in Gita. Was Krishna teaching Karma Yoga to Arjuna at the beginning itself? Well, suppose a poor man, lazy, not willing to go to a college or a university, but intelligent, healthy, stays at home, or maybe sits in the streets and asks you for $1, begging from morning till evening, at the same time saying, oh, money can't buy you everything. Money is not the end of the world. We should not worship mammon. What will you do? What would Jesus have done? The person is talking the language of renunciation. But he wants money. If he did not worship mammon, he would not beg. But if somebody asked you, you go and work, earn your bread by honest toil, by honest work. That he won't do. He sits quiet somewhere. He's healthy, he's intelligent, and he may be educated, but he's not willing to do his allotted duty and responsibility. Suppose he's a teacher in a university, or he's a farmer. He stops doing all these professional duties and responsibilities and withdraws from all these things and sits somewhere in a corner. What should we do? We should ask him to work. We should ask him that you can never solve the problems of your life by running away from those problems. You can never solve the problems of duties and responsibilities by running away. Now, Gita again and again states, whatever work we do, it will have some problems. Any work. No work can be perfect by itself. You ask anybody. A billionaire wants to be a much richer person. A millionaire wants to be a billionaire. A billionaire wants to be still richer. A politician wants power. A student wants the highest grade. He may get a high grade, but not the highest. So whatever we do, there will be one element of discontentment or dissatisfaction. That's natural. Not necessarily disappointment. But whatever we do, till we get the result, we'll be anxious. We will have something to work for. But once we get the result, there will be an element of discontentment, dissatisfaction. For a moment, there will be momentary satisfaction. But that momentary satisfaction slowly gives way to discontentment because you want more. So long as there is a desire for more, there cannot be perfect satisfaction. That's the problem of work. Now, just because there are problems associated with every kind of work, do we run away from work? No, we do not. Krishna says, by running away from work, you cannot solve the problems associated with work. We can solve the problems of work only by working. So first, one should give up lethargy, laziness, inertia, which is technically called tamoguna, means the lowest state of human mind, where you want to do things, but you avoid. A kind of psychological and spiritual cowardice, psychological and spiritual suicide. You want to do it, you're anxious, you would be happy if somebody else does it for you. But you yourself cannot bring yourself to do that work. This is psychologically and spiritually self-destructive. So give up that lethargy, that laziness, that inertia, and work with dynamism, zeal, and determination. Because action is much superior to inaction due to laziness. Dynamism is much better than lethargy. I shall now draw your attention to something that happened very in recent times during Swami Vivekananda's life. There's an interesting episode in Swami Vivekananda's life. When Swamiji was traveling through Japan, that must be in the year 1900. There's an interesting incident in his life. Now, from 1900 to 1905 was a crucial period in the history of Japan. You know, in 1853, Japanese ports were opened. When Commodore Perry went there, Japanese ports were opened, and Japan was forced to open its doors and windows. Japan became a big industrial and naval power by the turn of 19th century. By almost 1900, Japan had caught up with the rest of advanced nations in economic and military power. And in 1905, in the Japanese-Russo War, Russia was defeated. Russia was a mighty big Eurasian power. It was completely destroyed. Russian naval power was destroyed in the Battle of Vladivostok in 1905. So when Swami Vivekananda was passing through Japan in 1900, Swamiji was highly impressed by the determination, by the dynamism, by the hard work, the organizational efficiency, the zeal, patriotism, discipline, all these that he found among the Japanese people. So he wrote a letter to one of his disciples in India. And in India at that time, there were some very conservative, religious-minded people who thought that poverty was spirituality. Economic and social backwardness are the signs of greatness, which is certainly the very opposite of teachings of Vedanta, which was the very opposite of the teachings of the great Vedic sage of ancient times. But somehow, the whole balance was put upside down, a kind of Shirshasana of values, headstand. That was what Swamiji found in India when he was traveling. So one of his conservative disciples from Madras wrote a letter to Swamiji. That letter was a response to Swamiji's letter. Swamiji wrote to him, "See, I am now passing through Japan. These fellows are wonderful fellows. They work hard, and they make their country great. They are trying to apply the latest science and technology for the advancement of the nation and society. This is a lesson that you Indians should learn." Swamiji didn't mean the whole Indian nation. He mean conservative people, traditional people, which are a minority of Indian population, who was against any kind of modern science and technology. Highly conservative, obscurantist, backward-looking people. And one of Swamiji's disciples was a very wonderful representative of this attitude. So, in reply to Swamiji's letter, most probably Alasinga Perumal, he wrote back. There was a very orthodox person. Swamiji, why should we worry about education, science, technology, and economic development? We have a great spiritual culture, Puranas, mythologies and all that. Then Swamiji wrote a scathing letter, and he said, you don't want material prosperity? Eating leaves and grass for centuries, you have become next door neighbors to brutes. These are his own words. Now, they find when people try to philosophically justify the lethargy, laziness, inaction, and orthodoxy, Swamiji tried to instill a sense of pride, a sense of the need to employ the tools of modern science and technology for the advancement of the country and society. The same thing was done by Lord Krishna 5,000 years earlier. Arjuna said, I don't want material prosperity. In the first chapter, Arjuna said that I won't work. In the second chapter, at the beginning, maybe in the 7th or 9th verse, Arjuna says, Guru nahatvahi mahanubhavan sreyo bhoktum bhaiksham api ikaloke hatvartha kamamstu guru nihaiva bhunjiya bhogan rudhira pradigdhan. Arjuna says, by not doing my duty, if I have to live the life of a beggar, that is better than working hard for material prosperity by doing our duties and responsibilities. Duties and responsibilities may be unpleasant, but we cannot solve the problems of unpleasantness by running away from duties and responsibilities. So first Krishna tries to elevate Arjuna from a state of lethargy to a state of dynamism, action, and manliness, self-confidence. It is a lesson for any of us. Whenever there is a conflict, we sometimes display what are called in psychiatry withdrawal symptoms. Then mind suddenly projects a kind of conflict-solving mechanism. We try to justify, psychologically, we try to justify what we are doing instead of raising our mind to a higher level, to the level of the ideal. We try to bring the ideal to where we stand. It is a kind of internal self-deception. This very often happens. So this is a very serious problem in human life. When we have a problem, we sometimes try to run away from the problem, run away from the duties and responsibilities related to solving the problem. And then we try to justify. We try to give a philosophical justification to our withdrawal. But Krishna won't have anything to do with that. Then Krishna says, it is always better to be active. At least to be active with desire, motivation, and ambition than to run away from the field of duties and responsibilities like a coward. But then that's not enough. You may work hard with a strong ambition, with motivation and desire. Certainly that's better than cowardice, running away like a coward from the field of action. But the most successful, the most dynamic, the most active businessman who works hard day and night and who aims at success in life may have some other problems. Work, even if it is active, dynamic work, as I said earlier, is always associated with some problems. Anxiety, neurosis, anxiety about the results of what we are doing when we are engaged in work, and the problem of disappointment when the result is not up to the expectation. So these are inevitable in any kind of work, any kind of dynamic, ambitious endeavor. Though it is better than inaction due to laziness, it by itself is not a very high ideal. Because you work hard, you make money, you succeed, and by the time you finish your game, you do not have the psychological or the physical health to enjoy the fruits, the results of all your endeavor. Anxiety, neurosis, depression, all these problems render the mind incapable of enjoying the success, enjoying the result of dynamism and action. So that is not enough. But we cannot run away from the field of action. But we cannot just become victims, slaves of success, problems of abundance. Sometimes we become slaves of success. Success also becomes a tyrant. And any kind of tyranny is unbearable, unpleasant. Freedom is a natural instinct of every human being. Tyranny is the very opposite of it. So sometimes we become slaves of success. Dynamism and action sometimes become tyrants. We cannot break free from them, from their clutches. Here, Lord Krishna gives another solution to this problem. We can work with dynamism, action, zeal and enthusiasm, but we can do that without being a slave of the work we are doing or being the slave of the result of the work that we are doing. Attachment to the result of the work, obsession with the result of work is always a big problem. When we are obsessed with the expectations and the result of work, that obsession becomes a source of unspeakable psychological misery and pain. But at the same time, if the same dynamic work could be done without attachment, then we can succeed, we can enjoy the fruits of our work, but we can avoid the anxiety, the pain, the grief, and the depression that normally are associated with whatever work we do. It's called Karma Yoga. So there are 3 stages you can find. It's very simple. The first stage is the most pathetic, avoidable, most despicable state of human mind. The tendency to be a psychological, a spiritual hypocrite. We try to run away from our duties and responsibilities. At the same time, we try to give a justification for our running away. We try to cover up our spiritual, mental cowardice. That is the most despicable state of human mind. That is a kind of psychological lethargy, spiritual suicide. Such a person will not be able to have any spiritual progress, and his life in this world also will be miserable. The second stage is work with ambition. When you plan something high, try to succeed, try to achieve something, have a high goal to be aimed at, to work for, to be striven for. The third stage is, that is the ideal stage. Work for a high ideal, work hard with enthusiasm, application and dedication, but keep the mind non-attached, because that will save you from all the innumerable psychological problems associated with successful work. Successful in the material plane. But as I said earlier, the most successful businessmen may have some pain somewhere in the corner. That could be avoided if dynamism and action could be combined with an element of non-attachment. This is called Karma Yoga. But very often there are obstacles. There are problems. When we give a graphic description of this evolution of human mind or human action, it may appear to be simple. But there are some inevitable difficulties, obstacles, problems that we may have to encounter in the process. In fact, Arjuna puts this question to Krishna. Arjuna asks this question. Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charadi purushaka anichannabi varshneya baladiva niyojitaka. It's a very, very question. In fact, this is the question which every civilized man should ask. That's a sign of civilization and culture. Arjuna asked the question. See, I don't want to do these evil things. I don't want to be too much obsessed with the results of action. Or I don't want to run away from my duties and responsibilities. There are many things which I am doing which I do not really want to do, which I want to avoid doing. And there are many things that I would like to do, but I cannot bring my mind to do that. Anichanabi varshneya. I don't want to do that. Still, my mind, as if propelled by some external forces, is drawn towards that. I want to do certain things, but I cannot bring my mind to do that. I want to avoid doing certain things, but I cannot bring my mind to draw away from those undesirable deeds. Now, what is the mystery behind? In answer to this question, Lord Krishna gives makes an interesting point. He says, Kama yesha krodha yesha rijo guna samudbhavaka makashano mahapapma vidhyena mihavairina. Here Lord Krishna is speaking about the source of this undesirable tyrant of problems. He says lust, wrath, which are characteristics of the active spirit, Rijoguna Samudbhavaka. There are people who are born with an active spirit. So they will have their mind full of action, and too much of obsession with the work that we are doing may create undesirable emotional problems, anger, lust, and so on. So how to get away from these problems? And Lord Krishna gives the answer. There are innumerable answers given in the text, but the easiest and the most practical step is to keep the mind focused on a high spiritual ideal. Either you may believe in a God to whom you surrender the results of all your actions. This could be practiced by anybody belonging to any religious tradition. It could also be practiced by people who do not belong to any religious persuasion. They can do that. Well, I'm doing this duty for the good of others. I don't have any obsession. I don't have any attachment to the results of the work that we are doing. Interestingly, you find such questions and answers in the biblical literature, because now this is the Christmas season. I will just, for those, there are some who may be interested. In the chapter 7, the St. Paul's Epistle to the Romans, St. Paul himself puts this question and he himself provides the answer. St. Paul expresses his difficulty. For what I would, that do I not. what I would like to do. I'm not able to bring my mind to do that. For what I hate, that I do. What I would try to avoid doing, that I'm forced to do, as if somebody is forcing me to do. And what I would like to do, noble deeds, that I'm not able to bring my mind to do. So what's the mystery behind? St. Paul's asks these questions. And again he continues, to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, I find not. I have the will to do what is good, but how to do that good, I do not know. Then he says, it is no more I that do it, but the sin that dwelleth in me. Kamayesha, Krodhayesha, Lord Krishna says, lust, wrath, and some of these inherent human follies. But St. Paul puts it into typical biblical language, he called sin. Sin can be interpreted in the Vedantic language as some of the inherent human characteristics which are opposed to our true spiritual nature. And once we try to understand our true spiritual nature, these undesirable traits, undesirable characteristics can be removed. So to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. Then St. Paul himself gives the answer. Now if I do that I would not, it is no more that I do it, but the sin that dwelleth in me. And this sin, the other law, he finds dwelling, he says, in my members, warring against the law of the mind. Law of the mind, warring against, means the true spiritual nature, opposed to these natural human tendencies of lust, greed, wrath, anger, and all these human follies. And Vedanta says, once we realize our true spiritual nature, these undesirable characteristics will naturally be removed. So what the Gita calls the senses, or the natural undesirable tendencies of the senses, St. Paul calls my members. Two different approaches to the same problem, almost identical. So Lord Krishna says, once we try to remember that we are, by our true nature, something beyond the senses, as St. Paul called the members. We are, by our true nature, at the divine consciousness, which is present in all beings, which is immanent in all beings, which is also omnipresent everywhere. Once we realize this truth, that we are something beyond the psychophysical mechanism, that very moment, these undesirable tendencies, the pulls of the senses, the tyranny of the senses will fall away. And once it happens, we will be able to get established in combining action and contemplation. Action by itself, without contemplation, can create problems. Though that action is better than inaction due to lethargy. But as I said, action creates problems of anxieties, depression and disappointment. But action cannot be avoided. So we must devise a scheme to act without being obsessed, without falling prey to the tyrannies of the senses. And that is possible by taking a different angle, taking a new approach to action. Act without desire. Act without attachment. And this non-attachment can be practiced through contemplation. So, in other words, Gita teaches this unique practical method of combining action with contemplation. Action we cannot be avoided, but action produces problems. So we had to devise a plan. We must have the good results of actions, but we must try to avoid the inevitable consequences of action with desire, action with attachment. So action should be combined with non-attachment. Non-attachment can come only if we contemplate on our true nature. Our true nature is that we are, by our very nature, divine. We are expressions of the universal, omnipresent, immanent, divine consciousness. This is a very big, elaborate theme. I have tried to give some ideas within a limited span of time. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.